You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Roisin and Paul.
And me, Paul Brophy. For today's programme, we are doing a political profile, and we're joined by former Labour TD and Minister of State for Carlow Kilkenny, Anne Phelan. Anne was first elected to Kilkenny County Council in 2004, in which the Labour Party achieved a fantastic achievement, winning 2 seats in the Thomastown electoral area, and repeating that feat again in 2009. During Anne's time on Kilkenny County Council, she was a member of the Corporate Policy Group and was last Cathaoirleach of Kilkenny County Council in 2010. In 2011, Anne was elected to the Dála at first attempt and was successful in being elected to the first seat in Carlow Kilkenny, and being the second woman to be elected to the constituency and the first woman to achieve the feat of gaining the first seat. Of course, Anne retained the Labour seat that was held up to 2007 for 46 years by the late Seamus Patterson. And in 2014, Anne became a junior minister with responsibility for rural affairs, with a big responsibility falling on her to implement the SEDGE report, which is the Commission for Economic Development in Rural Areas. And in 2016, Anne unfortunately lost her seat in that general election. And since then, Anne has gone on to work in the public service. So, Anne, you're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for the opportunity. Hello, Roisin. It's good to see you again.
Oh, it's great to see you, Anne, especially a woman who we know the reputation in Kilkenny is a woman who delivers, a woman who's inclusive, and a woman that includes everybody and is so approachable.
Wow, that is a great introduction, Roisin. Thank you very much for that.
I suppose, Anne, we'll go back to the beginning. Your first foray into politics was in 2004 when you were elected to the Kilkenny County Council. What was your thought process as regards putting your name forward and going for politics?
Yeah, I suppose you're asking, Paul, what was the motivation? Well, I suppose the motivation was that we were kind of looking around, seeing other places being able to have good political representation inside in Kilkenny County Council, very good political representation, and they were managing to draw down the resources of the local authorities into their communities. Now, like we always had good representation, down around here in Graignamanagh, but I suppose probably what we really felt was that having somebody from, the Graignamanagh area, would have been from the town itself, Paul, would have been an advantage. And that was the thought process. Now, I have to say, at that point, we were very green and very naive about, politics, and didn't really kind of, I suppose, really have an idea of what we're getting into. But I suppose, the realization came very quick. I had been on, an awful lot of committees, have been putting forward an awful lot of representations for the local community, the playgroup, for the school, for different safety features, lots and lots of things. And then we felt, look, let's have a go and see if we can sit at that table, and if we can sit face to face with the people who decide, how these resources are drawn down. So I suppose that was the motivation. I suppose, first of all, it was probably more a community motivation rather than a political motivation. But it's just like any team, Paul, you choose to be a member of a team, and you put that team's bona fides forward. I I suppose, like the ethos of the political, the Labour Party, because, you know, it represented everybody. It represented, you know, we'll say what people used to refer to as the haves and the have-nots. I don't think anybody refers to that anymore. But it was, I like the equality aspect that you find in the Labour Party, and also the Labour Party has always had, you know, a very good, I don't mean career, but very good, you know, long-standing traditions for social equality, and it certainly lived up to that. And that was actually the one thing that I really liked about the Labour Party, was its, you know, its social conscience.
And of course, Graiguenamanagh has one of the longest established the Labour Party branches in Ireland, going back to 1912. So there was always a big, you know, traditional kind of Labour vote in Graiguenamanagh, and I was talking with Tommy Prendergast, and his uncle, I think it's John Bulger. He said he would have been very, very supportive of you again when you were starting out. He passed away
John,
not long ago.
Yeah, John was very supportive. John was part of the Labour Party way back in the day, and it is true that Graiguenamanagh was the longest established branch in Ireland, and, you know, they kept that tradition going for an extraordinarily long time. You know, it's seen its ups and downs. Ireland has seen its ups and downs as well, but I suppose this is, you know, they say that politics is the art of the possible, and that is very true. But there is a great Labour tradition in Graiguenamanagh. There would be, so that was definitely a factor in deciding, you know, what party were you going to stand for. Like, it's no secret that you know, my family would have been involved in the Labour Party, almost everybody, all down through the years. So it was a kind of I suppose, a natural step. Plus the fact that it fits in with the way I think myself, you know, about things as well. I like social equality, and I like everybody to be able to have a good chance in life with good education, good health services, you know, and that is available to everybody. You know, that it doesn't, you know, like we say sometimes, you know, if our health service and things like that, you know, it can be very difficult, and sometimes, you know, it appears that maybe your income is kind of, you know, and that is very unfair. I think health services should be based on medical needs, not on your income.
Absolutely, 100%.
And that leads me on, that was going to be my question, is were you always involved in politics? But you said your family was always Labour Party. So were you always involved in politics before you put your name for a county councillor and was elected onto the county council?
I wouldn't say I was always involved in politics proper, Roisin, but I would have been always involved in community activation, you know, representing the community, and I would have been very aware of politics, and you know, it was discussed all the time in my house, and you know, we were very well aware of, you know, Seamus Patterson always visited the house. So yeah, we were always aware, but not involved in politics proper, I suppose, until we got our seat on Kilkenny County Council.
And that was a fantastic achievement to get elected at that stage, and in both yourself and Michael O'Brien, no one expected to win two seats, and you know, it was very, very touch and go, but you got in the end.
Yeah, it was very touch and go, Paul, and a very long day, I have to say, and a very long day. And we were told that it was a mathematical impossibility that the Labour Party could win 2 seats in the Thomastown electoral area. So there you go, mathematical impossibility.
Yeah,
But I say, Anne, anybody who knows Anne Phelan, if they say something's impossible, Anne will go, really? I knowing you the way Paul and I know you, you would go, really? That's interesting, and you would just prove them wrong.
Yeah, so it was, and it was a wonderful achievement, and it was a wonderful achievement for the Thomastown electoral area to think that they had 2 Labour councillors now in their coffers, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you got elected, and how did you find the transition to being a county councillor? Because there's a lot of stuff that hits you, straight away once you're elected.
Actually, Paul, one of the first documents I read when I became a councillor, one of the first, I suppose, statutory documents, apart from, there was lots of documents, but one of the ones that I really remember that stuck out in my mind was reading the River Basin Management Plan.
Wow.
So, wow, there you go.
Isn't
that just amazing? I remember reading that. I think it was the first or second week in August of 2004. And I was thinking, oh gosh, and it was all about, the Barrow and things that we had to do to improve water quality. So what do they call that? Back to the future or back to the past?
Like that, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Time travel.
Time travel, absolutely. So that's one of the documents. But it's like, I suppose, any skill, Paul, that once you get in and you navigate, kind of navigating all the different departments and navigating, how it all works. And once you kind of get that, then you can kind of begin to see, and plan, well, where or how are you going to draw down those resources? And also, the council always gave an induction for the new councillors, which was very good to try to give them, a bit of a footing. And then it was actually really trying to get to know people. And I have to say, I find everybody very decent, everybody very decent in the county council. They're all there trying to do their job, doing the best that they can. And, sometimes I suppose, the public forget about that. And sometimes also there are some, aspects of, sometimes we think about county council, what do we think about? Roads, water, probably building houses and things like that. But the council is just so much more than just that bread and butter. They're hugely important as well. But, the libraries are so important. The heritage is so important. And coming from Kilkenny, I mean, our tourism, and the county council backs our tourism so well. They do that job very, very well. So, sometimes that element of the council is forgotten about a little bit, but and it's very important, to get that out there and get people to realise that we have a marvellous county in County Kilkenny, and of course a marvellous county in County Carlow as well. Tourism product, very good in Carlow too.
Oh, sure, you're only on the border there in Graignamanagh.
Absolutely.
Paul, diplomacy there, Anne, is there?
Absolutely, yeah. And Paul, we are blessed to have the River Barrow, as you are blessed to have the River Nore in Kilkenny as well. Once you have a river, it's like trying to bake a cake. You have the ingredients, don't you, when you have a river. And a lot of the tourism element survives around the river and emanates from the river. Like, I mean, the fabulous castle in Kilkenny, and it won an award, I think, last week as well. And it is just one of our iconic places. It's something to be proud of, really.
And I love that walk down in Graignamanagh, especially, walking from Graignamanagh to St. Mullins and from Borris to Graignamanagh.
That is a beautiful walk, Roisin, and that walk hasn't changed. The river hasn't changed for centuries. You know, it's just, it has remained, you know, the same, and that is, and it's, we really realised, as you did as well in Kilkenny, you know, it's particularly during COVID when people really couldn't be with who they wanted to be with, and, you know, they could come out and walk by the river, you know, for an afternoon or an evening, possibly bring their children, and, you know, you had that sense of peace and tranquility in what was at that stage a world gone mad, really, because we didn't know what we were dealing with, and it was very frightening. And but it was lovely to have, you know, the walkways by the river to give you that kind of sense of peace and, of course, sense of belonging as well.
And Anne, one thing is, before we get into the nitty-gritty of your political career, the one thing I think everybody knew was Anne's canvassing team, the sandwiches, that it's a whole family affair with you, and the caravan, and especially the ham sandwiches that your daughter Anya made. And, but you were renowned and known for being your canvassing team and looking after your canvassing team. Tell us about canvassing. You know, you didn't come from a political career, and what would you say made your canvassing door to door for your first time so successful?
Well, I'd say, to be honest, really, Roisin, it was the dedication of the team that I had around me. You know, they wanted to be part of, you know, they were kind of saying, look, we can do this, and you know, and they showed up, and I'm so proud of the way they used to canvass, and we used to have good fun as well on the canvas. Now we used to be freezing as well, and you know, and some days went much better than others, and canvassing is kind of like, you know, trying to convince people at the door to kind of put their faith in you, you know, to see, could you deliver for whatever, you know, they wanted. And I have to say, it was very much a team approach, and I have to say the sandwiches did help, because the team was fairly big, and oh, absolutely, Paul. So the team had to be kept fed, because there was a indirect proportion to the low blood sugars. Things could erupt if they weren't looked after from you know, a hunger point of view. But yeah, we had a great team, and you know, they worked very well, and they worked very hard from morning till night. And canvassing is hard. Canvassing is not easy. You're out in all weathers, you know, depending on the way, you know, the way things are going, but canvassing is not easy. But, you know, it is, the one aspect of it, I suppose, really is, Paul, is getting to speak to people, you know, that this is your work. This is what you have to do. You have to speak to the people.
And so you canvass, and you canvass very well. You got elected by the people of Carlow and Kilkenny, especially for Kilkenny, for the county council. So when you then discovered then that you were a county councillor, no political experience previous to that, but you knew about politics, was there anybody particular maybe helped you, showed you the ropes, and sort of even from your own party or different parties that you remember that were actually sort of had your back?
Oh, absolutely. I suppose I would have to say that, you know, there was a couple of other newer councillors within the Labour Party as well. And I suppose, in fairness, I suppose Michael O'Brien took that lead role, and he would have mentored us, you know, and because Michael had an awful lot of experience, and he had, you know, Michael had seen this all previously. There was kind of, I don't think there was any surprises for Michael at this stage. You know, he knew a lot of county managers, he knew an awful lot of the staff, he knew, you know, how the systems worked. So that was extraordinarily helpful. Yeah, but sure, we worked very well with everybody that we could. You know, I think when we were there, or when I was there at the time, it was the Fine Gael Labour kind of control the council. But I think kind of at local politics, it doesn't really kind of play out like that as such. You work with your colleagues, and you work on the consensus, and you work as a unit, with the council, and this is, to get the daily workings of the council through. You have to pass a budget, you have to get your roads budget, and you have to get all that passed, and you can't do that if you don't rely on a consensus, or if you don't work together with the other members that are across the floor with you, because if not, it just kind of descends into mayhem. And I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to have to work anyway. So, you have to have an ability to be able to work with not just the councillors, but all of the council staff and all of the council, as a unit. It's as a unit. And yes, there'll be disagreements. Yes, there was disagreements, but I suppose when you're trying to draw down something, a resource specifically for your own area, you're going to be kind of fighting for that area. And if there is a roads budget that you need to be drawn down for a particular road, yes, you are going to have to try to put your best foot forward, because well, that's the role that you were given. You have to represent your area, so yeah, you have to do that. But I have the greatest of respect for all county councillors, because they're all good people doing good work. And our system of local government, and I think especially in Kilkenny and Carlow, works very well, and I think it does deliver very well for the constituents of Kilkenny. Now, there'll be probably a lot of people out there who will say, oh, that's kind of rubbish, but that's not the case. Like, they do a good job, and they do service very well.
And then in 2008, you were rolling along. You were a county councillor, and then unfortunately you had health difficulties. You had a stroke, and that set you back a bit. But I remember we were talking with Maurice Shortle, and he said when he went down to see you in hospital, and he said you were always very kind of ferocious before that, but since that, but post let's say 2008, you came even more determined.
Yeah. Well, look at Paul. That's a long time ago now, and gosh, I can hardly even remember it now, really, I suppose. But you have to fight to come back, and you can't just and look at it. It's not everybody does this, Paul, because it happens to an awful lot of people. But everybody fights back and finds their way back. It's like somebody said to me, do you have a life that you want to come back to? And of course, everybody has a life that they want to come back to. And thank God, I came back quite well, and haven't had a problem since, thank God. But God plays a role in all of these things as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And you came back to deliver for Kilkenny. So,
Deliver.
Paul, start telling our audience all the things that Anne Phelan had delivered for Carlow Kilkenny.
Well, the big thing that when I was talking with your colleague Michael O'Brien was, and it's a subject that's very, very close to your heart, was the securing funding for the new wing of St. Columba's Hospital, which was, we were talking with John Paul Phelan a couple of weeks back, and the two of you worked very, very closely on delivering that project, because when he was telling us when he saw a capital list, and Columba's was it wasn't earmarked for investment, let's say. No. So he fought tooth and nail to deliver that, and I'm sure that's going to be a massive asset to the people of Thomastown and beyond.
Oh yeah, Columba's was hugely important, both to me and to John Paul. And it sometimes is kind of a case of, being in the right place at the right time. And we had seen that, we had heard a rumour about Columbus, and so I called John Paul and I said, look, we have to put our best foot forward on this one now. So we wrestled, and so we got it across the line. I think it's something like, was it 20? I can't remember how many million it was now, but it was a substantial sum of money.
Yeah, and it's on the capital plan as well. And I suppose another project that you were very closely involved in, did a great job on delivering would have been the CAT scanner in Kilkenny as well. You know, that was a lot of fundraising, and you know, it just needed that little bit of a push to get it over the line, and you gave it that push that was needed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Paul, God, I'd forgotten about that one. And actually, as I do remember the meetings in the department, you know, about this, and you know, they were kind of saying, oh, it has to kind of go through a process, and it has to go through this and that and the other, and we just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and persistence is a big thing in politics, Paul.
Absolutely. And I suppose sorry.
And there's one thing that you know, Paul and I both know, but even speaking to other people, was that everyone was all in the same mindset. That when you spoke to Anne Phelan, she was straight, she was honest, and she told you as it was, and you knew where you stood with Anne Phelan.
Well, there wasn't much point in promising Roisin what you couldn't deliver, and I suppose one of the unfortunate things for the Labour Party was when it took over in that just awful period, you know, where the country was on its knees. I think there was 5 months left in the coffers to pay teachers, doctors, nurses. Now, I know this has been hotly debated, you know, since, but the truth was the country was going to fall off a cliff. And, you know, like, I remember the day that Eamon Gilmore brought us in to vote for the programme of government in
UCD.
That was a very sombre day, really, because it was laid out, you know, the state the country was in, the sheer hard work that was going to have to be done to get that country back around again, the determination that it was going to take. And we knew we were going to walk through, you know, a lot of trouble, a lot of, you know, we didn't have unrest, but, you know, it was a very difficult thing to negotiate. And the problem was that it had to be done. You actually, once it was laid out in front of you, you couldn't actually walk away, even though I think for probably maybe more experienced people of us that day, and they said, don't do it, don't go into government.
Yeah.
Because they knew what was going to happen. They knew that we were all going to sacrifice the party for the sake of the country. But I would do it again. And look, look at our country today. It's modern. It has lots of jobs. So whatever we did, it did help the country to get back on its feet. And I think history might be kind to us, you know, for that, even though I suppose, you know, the party hasn't ever recovered since. But, you know, that's life, isn't it? I wouldn't change any of it.
But when you got elected in 2011 to the Dála, which was a fantastic achievement, and you know, you retained that Labour seat in Carlow Kilkenny that Seamus Patterson held for so many years. What was it like? I don't know anybody that would say they go into politics to stand over budgets that are going to make cuts and, you know, affect people, like in all walks of life. You know, that must have been hard.
It would have been. It was more than hard, Paul. There was lots and lots of rows, and there was lots and lots of rows. Oh my God, there were so many rows. But you know, it had to be done. We had to put our shoulder to the wheel. Like, you know, the IMF were there, and he who pays the piper calls the tune, Paul, you know. And I remember, I think it was to do with something to do with budgets that were being spent, and the IMF were saying they weren't going to continue paying these budgets. I think it was maybe back to work schemes or something like that, and they were saying, oh, you know, they're not delivering and they're not value for money. But we kind of knew better as people on the ground. We knew that, you know, people involved in schemes, it's not just about money. I know, see, they were the IMF, they looked at everything from a very black and white situation. They were, you know, they were financiers and accountants, and you know, whereas we were dealing with how these affected real people, you know, out there. And yeah, there was a lot of pain around at that time, and there was a lot of pain inflicted. And I suppose this is not something that's lost on us, you know, or it's not something we did lightly. You know, there are nights that you would spend thinking these things through, and you would think, I can't go through with this. But at the end of the day, I think a government has to, you know, we voted for the programme of government. So we kind of, you know, that was our, I suppose, no, I don't mean a mantra, that was our role and our responsibility, and we had to see it through to the end. And I think, looking back on it now, I think with the resources that we had, we did manage to do a lot, because we had a school building programme. Like, I mean, Tyndall College in Carlow was built during that awful time. And look at the magnificent institution it is now. We have the University for the Southeast, SETU, that was part of our programme for government, you know, as well. And we had a schools building programme, and you know, Kilkenny has benefited from that schools building programme, you know, it benefited quite well, I would say, from schools building programme. And that's not even to mention, you know, all of the units that were, you know, all of the units that were built, all of the investment, you know, that was put into you know, the schools built-in programme. There wasn't a school, I don't think there was a primary school in Ireland that didn't benefit from something from that government. So, you know, there's that as well. Now, I know people will always come back, you know, there was awfulness and, you know, the carers and everything like that. And yeah, but wherever we could, then we were, you know, able to fight our way back, and the country has fought its way back. And you know, it's and I'm delighted that it has, and I'm delighted that now there is, you know, a lot of money, and I'm delighted the government now is able to put a lot of money behind, you know, a lot of things. It's just wonderful.
And so, you know, you and you are one, and Paul and I can back this up. You were one of the TDs that delivered the most for Kilkenny. You know, you were like a Trojan delivering for Carlow Kilkenny. You know, you just didn't get elected. You worked like a Trojan horse, and you brought and delivered more for Kilkenny than many, many other TDs.
I suppose, you know, but we wanted to deliver for Carlow and Kilkenny, because I saw that was the job. And I know people are saying, you're elected to do national politics. And we always have this argument, national politics versus your constituency, and your constituency, you know, you shouldn't be representing your constituency. This is an argument that is, you know, that is put forward all of the time. And yes, there is a case to be made for when you elect national politics or national politicians, you know, that leave them as legislators. But that's fine but unfortunately in the real world, if you don't deliver for your constituency, you won't be there for very long.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So it's a dichotomy that we have in Irish politics.
Yeah. I was talking to Maya Fitzpatrick, and she
said,
we were chatting. She said, the one thing about Anne Phelan, she was very inclusive when you had your Labour Party talks out in the county council as a TD and county councillor, and you always included everybody, and you wanted to know the facts, and you wanted to know everybody's opinion, because everybody in the local party opinions mattered, and you were so inclusive.
Well, I certainly try to be Roisin, because you see, you can't, you can't just listen to all the I suppose, I don't mean nice stuff, but I mean, if people are telling you, yes, this is how it is all the time, you have to you have to hear everybody, because everybody has an opinion, and everybody's opinion is as valid as the next person's. It's how you take, what they're saying, how you put it together, and how you decide, well, what action are we going to put into place around, what people, are saying. And I suppose I heard in Kilkenny that they needed new schools, and they were under pressure, and, and they did, I would have said that, at the start of it, we certainly did get the ball rolling for the schools. And I'm proud of that, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in 2014, you became a junior minister. The official title is absolutely nuts, and I'd be here all day trying to say it. But it was for rural affairs, rural Ireland. A lot of people still live in rural Ireland. I remember talking to Aidan O'Riordan. He's a Labour TD in Dublin Bay North, a former colleague of yours, and there was a discussion one day, I believe, in a parliamentary party meeting. It was around, small primary schools and the possibility some of them might have to be amalgamated. And he remembers, he tells me, you stand up and you say to Rory King, Rory, there's 2 hurling clubs in East Carlow. He said, they're not going to amalgamate. What chance do you have of 2 schools, amalgamate? You know what I mean? So rural Ireland, and it's, intricacies, are something that, you're very passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it just came out that way, Paul. But I suppose what I was really, I think I probably lost my patience kind of, with him that day, because
I remember Aidan saying he looked at you and he's kind of like as if and Rory's knowledge of East Carlow, I'm sure wouldn't be very extensive now.
No, but what, I think he thought this was the best idea in the whole world that he had, to amalgamate schools. But you see, I just felt that, people on the ground, you can't make people do something. And I felt like I always felt now, and in fairness to Rory, he agreed, in the end that because he did amalgamate other stuff as well that and I'm not even certain how that is even working today, or how prudent that was back in the day either. But you see, you can never force people to do something, Paul. The more you try to force them, the more they will kick back. And I think schools amalgamation, and it has happened actually, and it has happened up in Kieran. But if the school community want to do it, I think it probably needs to start, rather than at a national level. Maybe now we should probably have a policy about it. And indeed, we have a policy about it, but I think it has to come from within the school community. I don't think any politician or minister for education can say, we're going to amalgamate schools. Now, there's a lot of sense behind amalgamating schools, because it is shown that the bigger your school is, the more resources it gets, the more teachers it has, the more offerings, you can make. But I just kind of felt that, no, this was a policy that wasn't going to play out very well in rural Ireland. And that's always the kind of push-pull thing with politicians as well. There can be a kind of a lack of understanding, sometimes between, when you live in a large urban area and you're based in a small rural area where, public transport isn't what you would like it to be. Your access to health isn't what you would like it to be, compared to maybe when you live in Dublin, when you can get on a bus, or you can get the Lewis, or you can get the Dart, or where it's quite difficult to get across, we'll say even County Kilkenny from time to time. The public transport system, we need to be able to join it up a little bit better. Yeah. Now, I know we have the big stick now that climate change is, and that will certainly make us wake up and, look to how are we going to make public transport much more user-friendly, because we just have to do it because, of the emissions, in the transport, sector. But also the other thing is, I suppose, Paul, we used to have fun in politics as well. It wasn't all, You're
known for your sense of humour, Anne. You're known for your sense of humour and your lovely, infectious laugh. Now, what I'm curious, because you were talking there about, talking to Roy Quinn and everybody at the cabinet, and an awful lot of people, as you said, they didn't realise there was people existed outside the M50. So now what I'm curious is, I said, you're known to deliver, and you're known to go for it, and you deliver. You're known for your sense of humour and your quick wit. Like you said, Roy, if you can't amalgamate the hurling clubs, how are you going to do the school?
Yeah.
So what would you say, and I know you're going to be very, very bashful in this, but you delivered more than an awful lot of people, and you don't get the credit, the personal credit, for what you did deliver here in Carlow Kilkenny. And everybody knows that. So what was your power, your strength in your power of influence?
Gosh, that's a hard one now, Roisin. So it is.
So if somebody, what do you think that because this would be a very good answer and a question for maybe younger people younger politicians coming up and saying, well, how do we, I'm feeling delivered for Carlow Kilkenny, and they see what you delivered. So what advice would you give then to other politicians who will be walking in your shoes?
Well, I actually think, Roisin, an ability to be able to work with everybody is probably a key thing, because, I mean, I've worked with everybody, and I've never actually gone out of my way to be particularly antagonistic or particularly aggressive, or anything like that. And I think that, if people see that you're, I suppose, reasonable, or at least can recognize, what the boundaries are, and then you need to be able to kind of maneuver in between those boundaries. And I think you have to be persistent as well, and I think you have to kind of choose your battles carefully. Mm-hmm. And I suppose in a way, we got lucky enough. Again, I come back to being in the right place at the right time, because being a minister, we didn't have that much money, to go around. So you know, being able to draw that down insofar as we did was actually, I suppose, quite good. And but you know, talking about achievements is quite. I think it's a bit embarrassing when you talk about achievements. I think that's what is it like? It's like
is it the Irish thing? Is it that Irish thing?
Isn't it? Irish people, you know, when they say, "Oh, that's beautiful dress," and you say, "Ara, go on, sure, I only got that in such a place."
Yeah, but
you know.
But you see, I think it's something when you deliver for people, that your purpose and the value that you brought to your role, and you fought tooth and nail for the constituents, especially your voters and your local community. That's powerful. That says a lot of how much you think of the people who voted for you and the people that you live with within the communities.
Yeah, but you know what, Roisin, being able to look back and being able to kind of, you see, it's not only the voters, and it's not only, like, we'll all reap the benefits. We all have reaped the benefits of, you know, what's been drawn down, like, you know, all the people in Thomastown, you know, with St. Columba's, they'll all reap benefits, you know, because of that, or, you know, it's another asset in their community. It just makes people's lives just a little bit easier. You know, think of the kids going to school, the new schools, you know, their lives will be made that little bit easier as well. So a wise person told me once that the good work that we do lives on after us. And I there's a great comfort in that, actually.
So when you're sitting down at night having a cup of coffee at the end of the day, even now, or reminiscing on the cold winter nights by the fire, or in the summer or the spring walking along the barrow, what would you say? Now, you're going to say, Roisin, that's a tricky question. That's like asking who's my favorite child. But and you can't do that. And so what would you say would be your 3 most proudest achievements of your political career?
Oh God, Roisin. I think one that stands out in my memory is getting me a playground for Great Namanna.
Lovely.
Yeah, that was equality.
Yeah.
I think, wait till I see.
There's so many.
Well, you know, the schools building program being, you know, and some of those units, special units, getting those were a big deal, you know, as well. And I can't think of it. I'm at a loss now, actually. I'll have to dig out old press.
Surely St. Columba's was a big.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, St. Columba's was not only a big thing, it was St. Columba's is a very, because in Great Namanna we have a tradition with St. Columba's as well. You know, so St. Columba's would be a big deal, and I suppose, you know, the whole boundary issue and all of that is, that was
a pretty intense affair.
Oh, that was an intense affair, Paul. Yeah. It really was, and both myself and John Paul knew this, as well as the other politicians. You know, but it's amazing how all politicians and none were able to unite under that issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like there are people who live in South Kilkenny and they use Waterford, you know, for school and for health and everything like that. But when you ask them, where are you from? I'm from Kilkenny, and there's no ambiguity about that.
No, and it was divisive, Paul. It was a divisive time as well, and you know, and actually, both myself and John Paul had been to it twice, because when we were on the council, the same thing happened as well, and I just couldn't believe it happened in the Dáil as well. It was very intense. Yeah, now, there's 3 of you see a few rows all right now.
you always, you were always a person you could have an argument with, I'm told. You could have a real good discussion with, and then you could go for a cup of tea with afterwards, and you always had a smile.
Yeah, Roisin, look, you know, you were never arguing with the person. You were only ever, you know, and you know, you were arguing out the topic, or you were arguing out, you know, the piece of legislation, and you also had to take on board what they were saying as well, because, you know, you weren't always in the right, you know, either. And just because you were elected to Dála Éireann didn't all of a sudden mean that you were all seeing and all knowing. You know, that's yeah, but yeah, it was a great time. It really was a great time. Like, I would encourage anybody to go into the political arena, because, you know, there's great highs there. Now, I know there's also great lows as well, because there's no balance really. It's kind of you're up or you're down. There's very few, I suppose, middle of the road days, or there's very few average days. But I suppose people would be happy to know there's not average days in Dála Éireann.
So, Anne, on those low days or those down days, what inspired you? What got you out of bed in the morning? What gave you that? Because you're known to be a very determined woman, but a woman with dignity and integrity and a great sense of humor. So what was those down days? What inspired you and what got you out of bed in the morning?
I'd have to say, Roisin, it was the people that were around you, and the people who worked with you, and the people who were on your team, you know, and all of the people that, you know, you would pick up the phone to and have a chat with, and, you know, you seek out their opinion as well, and think, you know, try to kind of come out of your own head, I suppose, a little bit, and try to get out there, you know, you know, am I taking the wrong approach? Should I be looking at this from, you know, a different way? Or sometimes that's not easy. That's not sometimes an easy thing to do. And I don't mean to try to portray that it's as simple as that, because it certainly isn't. But you see, because politics is a vocation more than a role. Like, it's 24/7, and you know, in a way you're so busy, there's not a huge amount of time to think about, you know, and also, you know, politics is reactionary as well, so you're always trying to respond to a crisis. And I think probably it wasn't until I was out of government that I actually realised that governments are always trying to respond to crises. So they don't get to maybe, you know, big long-term thinking, you know, where are we going to be in 30 years' time? Because, you know, the 5-year cycle is a pressure in itself, you know, and if you think about what you can achieve in 5 years, you know, for a government, it can be, you know, it's probably not an awful lot, but maybe, and of course, this, you know, comes back, the electorate decide what they want, and we are bound by the people. And that's why we love to live in Ireland, because we've a very good democracy here in Ireland, and democracy works. And if you don't like them, you can get rid of them, and you can vote them out at the next election. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to do. I mean, there are countries in the world who can't and have no ability to do that. And I think we're very lucky in Ireland that we have the democracy that we have. Now, we have warts and all. It doesn't.
Absolutely.
But I mean, nobody's perfect. So, and governments are made up of people. And sometimes, you know, we probably forget that it's actual people who are, you know, they're trying to do, you know, the best that they can with what they're given. And I'm not saying, you know, it is a privileged position as well, and I do understand that too, and there are privileges that you know, come with that, but I don't know if anybody kind of wants you know, how would I put it, you know, politicians, it's a job, you know. I mean, people need to be paid for their work. Yeah. So yeah,
and I think that's like that's very valuable. People need to be paid for their work.
Yeah, they do.
It's a value for
it is a value, Roisin. And to be fair, I mean, most politicians will work many hours, days and nights, and there's very few who will do, you know, 9 to 5. I mean, you know, there is no 9 to 5 in politics.
And no privacy.
Very little. Yeah, very, very little. And that's a whole other area as well. So it is, you know, and but having said that, look, at, you know, I can certainly look back on my time in politics, and I can say I did as good as I could. I certainly did my best, and there are some achievements I can be proud of. And I actually, one of the things that really gives me one of the greatest pleasures is that I can still pick up the phone to almost any politician, when they're beginning to change now quite a bit, that I don't have the same access to them anymore, but I can ring up, you know, anybody, and I can speak to them, and I'm quite proud that I am able to do that, I've no issue, you know, with any politicians from any walk of life or any type of politics. I mean, I still work actually very well with all our local politicians and all our national politicians as well.
Yeah. And, you know, who would you say, and it doesn't have to be, it could be cross-party, if you would say who would you find, I'm trying to think of the right question here and phrase it right in case people start, but who inspired you politically?
Who inspired me politically? Well, it's not just, you know, one person, but there would be aspects of a lot of people, I suppose, that would add up, but no one politician, I suppose, has it all.
Bit of more diplomacy there too.
No, I'd like to think that, you know, there was aspects of everybody, you know, that, and of course you would be closer to, you know, some people more than others, so you would get an insight into maybe their lives or what made them up, and you would naturally, as in any group of people, you know, you're drawn to some people, you know, maybe more than others, and you know, I think that's important as well, that you have, you know, fellowship in all of that. But I'm not able to answer now. I think I'd have to probably think a little bit more.
And we'll get you back on to talk about that another time.
Surely, and someone like Seamus Patterson was someone who you would have. He did a lot of good things, and he had a lot of, you know, traits that, you know, were very, very admirable. I suppose the one thing about Seamus that you would share, you could work with anyone, and it didn't matter if someone went to you with an issue. It didn't matter. Even if you knew their political affiliations, even if you know there was no chance of you getting a vote out, he would still work like a dog with a bone, you know, to get the thing sorted.
Oh, wow. Well, I have to say that, you see, Seamus had many admirable qualities, and he certainly shared a fair bit with me, as did, you know, Michael O'Brien, as did, you know, Tomas Bannock, as did all of the Labour Party, you know, councillors on Kilkenny County Council, and we had you know, we did mentor one another a lot, and we had a good tight-knit group, you know, and we all helped one another, you know, Maurice Shortle, Tommy Prendergast, I mentioned Tomas, you know, that, and Mary, of course, as you mentioned earlier, you know, they were all comrades, you know, and I don't mean comrades as in the Soviet comrades, but, you know, they were very close allies, you know, in what you were trying to achieve. But you could become a very close ally as well with somebody, you know, who wasn't, you know, from your party as well. And that, you know, that happened, you know, that happened quite a bit as well. Like, I mean, you would have great laughs with people. I mean, you know, there's always, I suppose, when the seriousness of the day kind of lifts a little bit and you can just kind of sit back maybe and relax for a moment, you know, some of the laughs actually, you know, come forward. Like Pat Rabbit was a very, Pat really was, he was a wit. There is no doubt about that. Yeah, he was pretty exceptional. And I have to say, another one in Gilmore, extremely decent individual, you know, Joan Burton, actually fine person, and they're only kind of in my own party, you know, and there's lots and lots of people, but I that would be a discussion, I think, for another time as well, you know, if you were looking back on you know, the Labour Party. And of course, Seamus, I mean, sure, even when I was very young, like, I mean, Seamus used to come to the door in our house, and it was like that, you know, it was like those hushed tones, like, oh, Seamus Patterson was at the door, you know. He was very well respected, very, well respected politician, as indeed most of the people I worked with or were served in politics with me were all, you know, all good people trying to do their best.
I just remembered, because when I started off in my media and PR degree, you helped me with my media log. And and I'm surprised, I always still have it in my bookshelf. And it also said that you really did liaise and really was a great advocate for the Susie Long and the Susie Long board.
Oh, absolutely, you know, with that, and with, you know, Malcolm as well, you know, and Malcolm did, you know, was very close there as well. So he was, absolutely, very tragic thinking back on it now with, you know, when you look at all what's happened just, you know, with Vicky Phelan, and it's all very sad, really.
You're here to also talk about the broadband beast with Minister, with Phil Hogan. He was the EU Agriculture Commissioner, Phil Hogan, and Rural Affairs. So, you know, so we're not really getting to the depth. Look how much you did deliver, even with the broadband with Phil Hogan. How did you find working with Phil Hogan?
I worked, very well with Phil Hogan. We worked very, very well together. Phil did a lot for his constituency as well.
Yeah, you know, you were always there, you know, so you were just, and then there's so much for this media log that look how thick it was. And that was just for a couple of months that I was doing that over that period of time. I forgot all about that, Anne, and I still have it. That's 2014.
Wow. Yeah.
You know,
and actually, Anne, I was talking with Maurice Shortle, and he said you did something when you were in council, was very, very interesting. You were one of the first kind of local councillors anywhere in Ireland to talk about the whole Magdalen Laundries situation, you know, and you said you did a lot of research on that at the time.
We did.
You know, and we're now seeing it unfold. It's a tragic piece of our history, but it's certainly something that we need to, you know, acknowledge and work to ensure that never happens to anybody ever again.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. Very, very tragic part of our history. Well, I hope it's confined to history. you know, all of the, you know, the way women were treated in Irish society. And actually, you know, the Labour Party were very much at the, you know, at the centre, you know, of all of that, of, you know, women's health, women's mental health, you know, the equality referendum, that was all Labour Party, you know, I don't mean legislation, but it was all Labour Party thinking. You know, I mean, we say before the you know, abortion legislation and everything, you know, like that. I mean, the Labour Party, not that we were advocating for, we weren't advocating, we were just advocating for women, you know, to be able to make decisions about themselves. And like, I mean, we took a lot of flack for that. I mean, we got a lot of scars because of that, you know, but it's, you know, now people take for granted that this legislation has always been here. It wasn't, it was hard fought for. It was hard fought for by the Labour Party. Or, you know, equality legislation, you know, that was in the Labour Party manifesto. Hard fought for a long time as well, you know, and, you know, I think actually, you know, we got kind of left out of that. I actually think now a little bit, because, you know, that had to be thought about, brought through, you know, it didn't just happen now. And I'd like to thank everybody who was part of that, because it's, you know, it's great that, you know, people can live these kind of, you know, in peace and in harmony, you know, and don't have to be looking over their shoulder because of a personal, you know, situation. So I think that's great. I think Ireland has come a long ways. Now we've a lot of ways to come still, but, you know, if you keep fighting the good fight.
Well, I have another one, because we said how much she delivered. Now, I'm a Derry woman, you're a Kilkenny woman, and one thing I was so proud of, I'm really chuffed, the Derry Journal, you were even mentioned in the Derry Journal for breakthrough for Greencastle breakwater. Breakwater. That was in my own hometown Derry Journal. And Minister of State, you were an interagency meeting to take place in Dublin this afternoon to discuss the possible funding options which could lead to the resumption of the works in Greencastle breakwater. So you delivered not just for Carlow Kilkenny, but your role as a minister, even up to the Donegal. I feel like saying, Anne Phelan, this is your life. I have a proof. Look how much you delivered. And that's only half of it. That's only 1 year.
You'll have to send some of that on to me, Rosie.
You know what, Anne? I will gift this to you.
Okay.
Anne Phelan, this
early
is
Christmas
your life.
Yeah, an early Christmas present. Yeah. Well, look, there is life after politics as well. So there is. Yeah, so, there is life.
To finish up, Paul, I don't know if you have any more questions, but this is my last question, so Paul can finish up.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to, you said that you think, people should enter politics and everything else. So what 3 pieces of words of wisdom would you pass on to anyone who's in politics or thinking of entering politics?
Well, I think of, anybody who's entering politics, I suppose if I just take it from, and excuse me, Paul, about this now, from a woman's point of view, Roisin.
No, take it.
No, we'll open up now the whole thing, because, I mean, if you think in Ireland in kind of like 2022 that one of our ministers wasn't able to go on maternity leave, oh my God, we've no creche in the Dáil.
Wow.
How are women going to enter politics? When are we going to get, the 50-50, because that's how society is made up, that 50-50 approach, but politics is not the friendliest place, for a woman, for, all sorts of And mainly it's because it's not a family-friendly environment, I suppose, because, you know, it's long hours, it's intensive work. You can never say you're going home at 9 to 5. Now, maybe it should be 9 to 5. They do it in other parliaments. So, you know, I think that, you know, that should certainly be looked at from that point of view. But if I was to give somebody advice about going into politics, it's hard to know how to advise people going into politics, because you certainly need a good team around you, and you certainly need an understanding family. And I suppose you probably, they say that politics is the only career that always ends in failure, and I'm living proof of that. So I think you probably need to plan your career in politics carefully. And I don't think any politician ever does this, but maybe you should plan your exit strategy as well as your entry strategy.
Good, that's good. And the way I would look at that, you know, a lot of people say failure, maybe it's just a different pathway.
Maybe, Roisin, but the one thing you do in politics is you grow as a person, because, you know, there is a lot thrown at you. There's a lot that you have to, deal with, solve, you know, and there's not a college for politics, so you don't. So you don't go to a college and come out with a degree and say, "Hey, presto, now I'm that great politician." So
you have to really like people, don't you, and understand people.
Yeah,
and
you do
have to have people
an
skills
empathy with people. You do. If you're politics is probably, if you don't really like people or dealing with people's issues or have an understanding of what another person is saying, politics is probably not your best chosen career. But you know, I do believe that everybody enters Dála Éireann, you know, to get that amount of people to vote for any person that enters Dála Éireann is a huge achievement. And you know, that is an achievement in itself. Then you have to do the work. Then you have to do the work.
Well, my last words before I hand it back over to Paul, and then I will be quiet, Paul. What I'm taking away, and it's something I never thought of, and I think your analogy is just so right. The politics is reactionary, and governments are always responding to crisis.
Yeah.
That's what I'm taking. I've learned that from you today about what is politics, which I never thought about before. So I think that is very good to pass on to anyone, that politics is reactionary, and if you want to be a politician, you've got to be very good at crisis management and to how to respond to politics and crisis. Over to you, Paul.
And you're Minister of State for Rural Affairs. At the time, you were kind of split between kind of a couple of departments. That must have been absolutely nuts. And now we have a full Department for Rural and Community Development. And that, like a lot of the initiatives that we see in the Department of Rural and Community Development, such as our local community development, our LCDCs, PPN, the Acorns, you know, which was to support female entrepreneurs in rural Ireland. So a lot of things we see in this Department of Community and Rural Development, you got the ball rolling. And do you ever think, like, if you had the budget that Heather Humphreys now has, or Michael Ring had, you know, the things you could have been able to do?
Oh yeah. Oh, look, and I mean, Heather does a great job, and Heather Humphreys. Oh, I often envy the amount of money that she has. But sure, look, isn't it wonderful that she has all that money and that she is able to spend it, Paul? And I know that one thing, I think even in all of the different departments, Paul, I know that one thing we were saying that that if we were coming back, we'll say into the next government, that one of the discussions that we had was that it had to be a full ministry. The Minister for Rural Affairs had to be a full standalone ministry, that it couldn't be across different departments and it couldn't be an add-on, you know, that it had to be a huge consolidated role. Because if you think of, you know, apart from, we'll say, you know, the four main, you know, cities and, you know, and there are all of the other emerging, you know, cities as well, and all the hierarchy and everything like that. I mean, the Minister for Rural Affairs has a very large job to do. And I think in fairness, dealing with a huge amount of people as well, and trying to keep rural Ireland, you know, alive and prosperous. And in fairness to Heather now, I think Heather is doing a great job. I think she's always done a great job. But that was one of the things.
It's in with social protection, so hopefully in the next government it will go back to being a full standalone department.
Yeah, hopefully it'll go back to being, you know, a standalone department as well, because I think it's an incredibly important job. And you know, like most of our population lives in rural Ireland, and you know, there are real people and real communities, and they do need government support. I mean, there's no doubt about it. They do need government support, and you know, I'm happy that you know, what we try to do, what we try to get on, that I think we actually really understood communities, you know, and actually one of the funny things, I was way back in the day, and I think it was probably before, I can't remember whether it was before I was a councillor or in the Dála, where I was saying that we have to go back to talk to the communities, because the communities is where it's at. And that hasn't changed. I smiled when I read that, because that hasn't changed. It's and we're still, Paul, it's incredible the job I'm in. It's all about community. It's all about trying to talk to the communities, to, you know, get the communities to do projects. And climate change is going to be the very same. Climate change mitigation is all going to depend on communities. And we're all living and working, entertaining. It's all about community at the end of the day. It really is.
At the end of the day, it's the people within the community that make the community. And as you said earlier on, it's the sense of belonging.
It's the sense of belonging. Yeah.
Well, I'm feeling, unfortunately, it's 2020 on my clock. What time? 20220. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak to us, because I know I tried to get you on the radio and then I left the radio, but I had planned to do this on the radio. But you know, thank you so much for taking part in my media log, which was in 2014, I think it was. And I'll get that to you and pass that over to you. But I remember the time when I was looking for a photograph to have this, and I saw this, and I said, that is Anne Phelan, happy, always talking to people and approachable and always smiling.
Yeah, listen, the pair of you, why don't you come out to the hub one of the days, and we'll have a cup of coffee, and we can have a look at, as you say, this is your life.
This is your life. I'm feeling 1 year of your life, 1 year of your political life.
Very good. Very good.
Without disclosing my location, I'm actually not very far from that hub.
I'm feeling, thank you so much.
Hi, guys.